Hi, my name is Cameron Jenks, and this is my final video for client web app development. I'm going to be reviewing and explaining a snippet of CSS, HTML, and JavaScript code. Just glancing at the code, it appears that it creates a tabbing system using HTML and then CSS for the styling. It also incorporates a bit of JavaScript. Simply put, it allows users to swap between different sections of the web page. So glancing at the HTML first, we can see that there's a pair of div tags that encompass the two main sections of the HTML. So looking at the first bit of the HTML, we have a pair of div tags that's acting as a container with the ID of tabs. And then within that, we have three buttons, each with the class tab btn to uniformly apply the styles to all the buttons. And then directly following that, we have the data tab section with a unique identifier for each tab. This is very important for everything to work smoothly. Moving on to the second bit of content, we have another pair of div tags with the ID of tab content. And then within that container, we have three more div tags, each with the class tab content item, again to uniformly apply the same style. We also have the ID section, which associates the tab content with the correct data tab type. So the relationship between the ID and the data tab are very important. JavaScript, once someone clicks a tab, it will find the data tab type and it will then associate the correct content with the user click. So first glancing at the CSS, we have tabs, which displays in flex. So this allows all of the tabs to line up correctly. And then we also have margin bottom, which adds a 10 pixel margin between the content space and the tabs. So now moving on down, we have .tab btn with padding, cursor, border, and background color. So the first value in the padding adds vertical spacing, and then the second value adds horizontal spacing. So we've got 10 pixel vertical, 20 pixel horizontal. So basically this will make the buttons taller and a bit wider. And then moving on, we've got cursor. This just changes the cursor to a pointer whenever someone hovers over a tab button. The reasoning for this is just to further signify to the user that this is in fact a button that can be pressed. The border adds 1 pixel of a solid gray border. So the pixel value is how thick the line is. And finally, background color. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it will attach whatever color you assign it to the button background. In this case, it appears to be a slightly different shade of gray. So now for tab btn active, this will only occur when the user's mouse is hovering over a button. So it will change the background color to blue or whatever color you decide to assign it, and then also it'll change the text color to white, just to make it easier to read for the user. So moving on to tab content item, we start with display none, which just means that whatever tab the user has selected is the only tab that will show content. And then padding 20 pixels, this just increases the inner spacing to make sure the text and everything looks properly aligned. And then for border, once again, it's the exact same code as that was used in tab btn. And then .tab content item active, this ensures that once the user does select a tab, it bypasses the display none and shows the data. So now looking at the JavaScript, the class tabs is just, this is what makes the tabs interactive. It allows all of the content to dynamically update behind the scenes, reading the data that the user inputs, in this case a click, and it's figuring out what tab was clicked and what content to show. So now to start with, we have a constructor with the parameters of tabs container and content container. So these two parameters allow the class to connect to the corresponding HTML elements and update them. Directly below that, we have this .tabs container and this .content container. These two lines of code convert the tabs container and content container into a jQuery object, which just allows for easy access throughout the class. And then this .init just initializes the tab system. So moving on to init, this .tabs container .on click tab btn. This associates an event listener with all elements within tab btn. So basically all elements within those classes now have this event listener. So for the constant tab ID line, this section just takes whatever the user clicks and it'll take the corresponding data tab type and make sure it's correctly assigned. So if the user selects tab 1, it will read the data tab for tab 1. And then right here we're calling switch tab, which just is it handles the logic for actually switching between tabs. Directly below this line right here basically just sets the default active tab. So upon page load, it will take the first tab and it'll take the first tab listed, so in this case probably tab 1, and it would load tab 1 initially once you access the page and then switch from there. Now looking at the switch tab section, the first line, this .tabs container.find, this basically takes all tab btn values and then removes the active class on them to ensure that only one tab is active at a time. For the next line, this does the exact same thing but for the tab content. So below that we have the this.tabs container. This section of code basically takes the click, so whatever data tab value selected, tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, it will take that data tab ID and it'll add the active class to it. This works in pairing with the previous two lines, which remove all the active classes, and this ensures that only the selected tab is active. And then the second line does the exact same thing, just this time for the content. And now at the very bottom of our JavaScript, we have money document.ready. This is just finding the document object model and making sure that it's fully loaded. This is important so that we're not trying to access elements that aren't there yet. And now for our final line, we have constant tabs equals new tabs. So this is passing in the selectors for the tabs and the content. This instantaneously triggers the constructor, which calls the init method to set everything up. So now that we have gone over and reviewed all of the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript, I'm going to go over a couple ways that we can make the web application better and examples of how it could be used in the real world. So to start, one of the ways that we can improve the code is by adding dynamic content loading. So currently all of the tab content is preloaded within the HTML. This is okay for small applications, but when you have larger applications with more data and more things going on, this could lead to performance issues. So a way in which we can improve this is by dynamically loading tab content using AJAX requests. So as a result of this, this would optimize loading time and reduce the initial page size. Another simple way in which we can improve the code is by adding transitions, whether that be CSS or JavaScript powered. These come in the forms of like fade in, out, slide in, out, your crossfade transitions. It just makes the page look more complete and professional. Now moving on to examples of real world applications that this would be used in. This could be used in a dashboard interface. Really any basic web page could benefit from using this. A more specific example of this would be an e-commerce website or a product page. This tabbing system could be used to organize things like description, reviews, pricing, similar items, things like that. You could also use something like this even in interactive forms, so you could help guide the user throughout the steps, and they would just click each step as they go along. So as we finish this walkthrough or code review, I would like to just recap all the different sections of code and what exactly they do. So we began with the HTML structure, which laid the foundation for the tabs out. Each button was linked to its respective content tab using the data tab attribute. This approach also makes it much easier to scale and maintain in the future. Next, we looked at CSS. This just makes everything look nice, makes everything look pretty. If we didn't have CSS and Flex, the buttons wouldn't be in a line, they'd be all over the place. So CSS is really very important, very important. The display and the Flexbox properties were very crucial within the CSS to make sure everything aligns and looks correct. And then we also have class-based styling that reacts to user interaction. And now looking at the JavaScript, this is the functionality of the tab system. This is how it all works. This is where all the logic for that lies and interacts with the HTML and CSS. Within the JavaScript, the tab system uses a class-based structure. So all related methods, properties, and event bindings are all within that class. This means the code is modular, which makes it easier to understand, debug, and extend. So JavaScript listens for user actions such as clicks in this case. And instead of attaching an individual event listener for each button, it within the class uses event delegation. Event delegation is just when you attach an event listener to a parent element rather than individual elements. This also ensures that any newly added tab buttons will already have the event listeners attached to them without need for additional setup. So overall, this interactive UI system is very important, and it's used almost on any website that you can think of. They're even used in mobile applications, so this just makes it a very important skill and topic to understand as a developer. And the modular way in which this code was constructed just leaves for a great starting point for future real-world applications. It's very easily expandable and very simple. Thank you so much for following along with my presentation. I hope that this explanation has thoroughly explained the tabbing system and the different intricacies of how CSS, HTML, and JavaScript all work together.